It was warm and sunny out, a day just like one would expect for that time of year. There was a calm, gentle breeze that broke the intensity of the sun. All of a sudden, out of the corner of an eye, the calm was shattered. When George looked at the picture he had just made, he knew something was wrong. Something dangerous. They had to go now. George's hands were shaking as he slowly reached into the water. He knew he had seen something in the background of that picture, but he never expected it to be still here when he returned. His wife Lisa was screaming to him to just leave it alone and get the hell out of there. She did not want to get involved with whatever this was at all. But George was not about to just turn his back after going through all the effort to return here. But when he finally managed to get it on the boat, all hell broke loose. George did not even know if they would make it back to shore now. But what did George spot floating in the water? Why did he want to return for it, and why did it cause him so much trouble? But before we start our story, smash the like button, make sure to subscribe and hit the notifications bell, so you won't miss any new stories. George was pushing the motor of their little speedboat to go as fast as it possibly could. He needed to get to the exact spot where they had seen something floating. At first, it was difficult to determine exactly where they had been, and George started to panic. Maybe they were too late. Lisa was still utterly confused as to what was happening. All that George had wanted to share till now, that there had been something in the water here. They turned the boat and began their search, circling the vast lake and scanning for familiar landmarks. George pointed out potential spots while keeping a vigilant eye for anything unusual. After hours of searching and nearly giving up, Lisa suddenly noticed something unusual in the water. A small bump disrupted the surface. The couple steered their boat toward it, hearts pounding with curiosity and unease. As they approached, George cut the engine to move carefully. The water was still, and their nerves heightened. Stories of fishermen encountering sharks and whales flashed through their minds, adding to their tension. The object became more visible as they neared, though it was still unclear. George thought he saw long brown hair and even limbs, but he couldn't be certain. Anxiety crept in. Could it be a body? When they got close enough, Lisa leaned over for a better look. What she saw made her laugh in relief. "It's just a stuffed toy," she said, brushing off her initial fear. She smiled at George, suggesting they leave, but George hesitated. Something still felt off. Determined to confirm for himself, George stepped to the edge of the boat for a closer look. Suddenly he froze and yelled, "It's alive! I saw it move!" Lisa rushed over as George explained he had seen arms flailing. The couple's relief turned back to alarm. Whatever it was struggling in the water, clinging to a large piece of wood. They realized they had to act quickly to save it. As they neared the object, it became clear that it wasn't human, but a struggling animal. The wood kept it afloat, but the creature was soaked, heavy, and visibly exhausted. The couple knew they had to rescue it, but had no idea how to proceed. Despite their inexperience, they acted fast. George secured a rope to the wooden board, and after several attempts, they managed to pull it toward the boat. The couple worked together to hoist the animal onto the deck. As they stared, they were shocked at what lay before them. It was a large dog, or so it seemed. But George and Lisa wondered how the animal had ended up in the middle of the vast lake. Touching it, they noticed it was cold, and they feared they might have been too late. They carefully placed the dog in the center of the boat while Lisa fetched blankets to warm it. Meanwhile, George called a vet friend for advice. Together they waited, hoping the dog would survive. When George's friend answered, he advised monitoring the dog's temperature and finding something edible for it to eat. As they reached the dock, the question of food resolved itself. The dog was already eating the fish Lisa had caught earlier. George was surprised, as he didn't know dogs ate fish. Lisa laughed, relieved the dog was awake, though it seemed exhausted. They decided to care for it until they returned to land. As days passed, the dog regained its strength. Lisa grew attached, suggesting they keep it, saying, "You know I'd love to have a dog." But George hesitated. The more time they spent with the animal, the less like a dog it seemed. George proposed a deal. They'd research the dog first, and if everything checked out, they could keep it. Intrigued by the animal's unusual behavior, George sent a picture to their vet friend for clarification. While waiting for a response, Lisa bonded deeply with the dog. She spent her days fishing and feeding it smaller catches, and in the evenings, they cuddled. For Lisa, the vacation felt perfect with her new companion. Eventually, George's vet friend responded, suggesting the dog might be a Tibetan Mastiff based on its size and fur color. Lisa was relieved, happy to confirm it was a dog, but George was wary. Tibetan Mastiffs grow massive, and he worried about the responsibility. With only a few days left in their vacation, the couple needed to decide. George agreed the dog could stay temporarily, but it would need a vet checkup when they got home to ensure it was healthy and manageable. Once they returned, George called a vet who set an appointment 3 weeks later. He provided care tips for the meantime, which the couple appreciated. Lisa had a few extra vacation days and spent them with the dog. However, she began noticing odd behavior. The dog was unlike any she had seen before, and something about it seemed unusual. At first, she thought their new pet was having difficulty adjusting to a new region, but it was soon clear that something was odd, and their dog was different from others. They noticed that the dog was incredibly hungry. It managed to consume 2 buckets of pasta and a full box of fruit every day, and it liked every single type of food. They knew that the animal had to be hungry, but they had never seen a dog that could devour so much at once. But that wasn't all. Not long after they arrived back, they noticed that the dog barked weirdly. They had looked up videos of mastiffs barking just to be certain, but the noise that the dog made was completely different. In fact, it hardly sounded like barking. It had started as small echoes, but as the nights went on, it became even louder. The dog sounded much more like it was screaming. They worried that their neighbors would soon complain if the noises got any louder, and hoped that the trip to the vet would clear everything up. But they also knew that they were dealing with a special breed, so they put their concerns aside and continued to lovingly care for the cuddly pet. Until the next day, he did something incredible. Both Lisa and George had now resumed work and were always eager to return home to play with their new pet, which seemed to increase in size daily. But on this day, they couldn't believe their eyes. The dog could stand. They had never seen that before. None of them had tried to teach the animal this. Finally, the day of the long-awaited visit to the vet came. But from the moment they walked in, the vet looked puzzled. He asked them to give him a moment. He'd been documenting the different habits of the dog and working on his own research. So when he came back, it was with shocking news. The vet said, "I'm sorry, but this is not a dog." The couple stared at each other, then at the vet. They didn't understand what he meant. If their pet wasn't a dog, then what was he? "You brought home a bear." They couldn't believe their ears. What should they do now? They were both shocked at the news. What would this mean for them, and was it legal to have a bear as a pet? The vet smiled and explained that these questions were out of his expertise. He gave Lisa and George the contact number of an expert to consult about the bear they had found. After weeks of waiting, the couple met with the expert. He explained that keeping the bear as it grew would be dangerous for a residential area. Their options were to release it into the wild, where it might struggle to survive, or move it to a zoo. They decided the zoo was the safest choice. Soon, the bear reached 250 pounds, and it was time to say goodbye. The zoo gave them passes to visit whenever they wanted. George and Lisa visited often, feeling a special connection to the bear, their unusual guest who had lived with them for weeks. Lisa and George first met at a fishing camp and instantly fell in love. Their shared love of fishing became the foundation of their relationship. Over the years, they frequently embarked on fishing trips, often to explore new locations and catch different fish. One particular trip, however, was destined to be the most memorable of their adventures. After months of planning, the day arrived. George seemed unusually nervous. He had a secret plan for this trip, one that would change their lives forever. During a fishing trip near the camp where they first met, George proposed. Lisa was overjoyed and quickly said yes. From that moment, their bond grew even stronger. Their shared adventures continued after marriage, with fishing trips becoming a regular part of their lives. They explored different lakes, always seeking new experiences. This trip, however, would be their longest yet, a 2-week journey to a remote location they had long dreamed of visiting. The trip began with a hike through serene trails to their boat. The calm atmosphere set the tone for their adventure. After days of fishing, Lisa finally hooked onto something big. Struggling to reel it in, she was thrilled by the massive catch. They took pictures of the giant fish, proud of their achievement. As they relaxed later, George reviewed the photos and noticed something odd in one of them. He showed Lisa, and they decided to investigate. Determined to find the strange object from their photo, the couple navigated back to the spot where it was taken. The lake was vast, and it had been hours since they'd left the area. But they were resolute, carefully scanning the water in search of the mysterious discovery lurking below.